So David is the head of maths at Melbourne's Trinity Grammar, and he's been writing for Cambridge for close to 30 years, and in that time has written more than 30 books for us, which is pretty awesome. He's been at the forefront of our success with essential maths across AC and BCE syllabus, and which has been just wonderful for us for not only the standard series, but gold series as well. Without further ado, please welcome David.
Well, thank you very much, Kim. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Well, thanks very much for the opportunity to talk about the new course series that's coming up. Yeah, really looking forward to talking about some of the key features of core and the connections that they make with the essential math series that many people are familiar with. Before I get started though, I would like to define two words for this workshop, because there are two series that Cambridge work with, mainly the Essential Maths for the Australian Curriculum and the Core series, which is a bit of a follow-on from the Gold series. I would like to use the word core for this new series that we're talking about mainly today, and I would like to use the word essential for the Essential Maths for the Australian Curriculum series that was published. The Australian Curriculum version number 3, edition 3, was published at the end of last year. So that's in use for this year. So the two words core and essential will help us define the two series. I also would like to mention Scott Halligan, who's also a panellist here today. Scott is the chief, thank you Scott, hello. Scott is the chief publisher for the series and has been involved in the Cambridge Essential Math series for many years, and will be helping to answer some questions and making some comment from time to time. So Scott, feel free to answer questions and add your
All right,
bit,
thanks,
please.
David.
So in a little bit more detail, today I would like to talk about the core and the essential series and how we create a wide variety of differentiated learning pathways by using these series. I'd like to talk about some of the new self-learning and diagnostic assessment tools, some mapping, curriculum mapping documents, some new literacy resources, and of course, some of the latest digital interface resources that we have for teaching and assessment. All right, so getting started, first thing I would like to do is just talk first a little bit about the core series and the essential series and some of the common elements before I get into some detail of how they are different. So the first thing to say is that both series, core and essential, cover all the content descriptors of the Australian curriculum. Okay, one thing I want to be clear about is the core series does include and cover the content for all of the Australian curriculum. It doesn't go up to the highest level, include 10A, but it doesn't cover everything else from 7 to 10 in the standard Australian curriculum. So they obviously both cover all the content descriptors. They both have differentiated learning pathways to create different programs for students, either in a streamed or mixed ability setting in your school. And they both have similar types of print and digital resources, sometimes not presented at the same level, of course, but many digital and print resources like modelling tasks and digital workspaces, which I'd like to talk about today. All right, so unique to core. What's the main three things that how you could describe the core series that is being published now, ready for use for next year? So one thing would be to say that core is a series that spends more time reviewing key content before accessing the current curriculum at that level. The sections are more spread out, if you like. There are more sections allocated to each content descriptor of the Australian curriculum, and therefore there's more of a gentle gradient covering the Australian curriculum through the content descriptors. that gentle gradient is also reflected in the way in which the difficulty rises through the section exercises. So that through the proficiency strands and the problems that are set will be easier and will be of a gentler gradient. And finally, all the matching assessment tools associated with core, of course, match the difficulty of the questions in the text. So those resources suit realistic learning pathways for students using the core series. On the other hand, to the other series, the higher level, essential, which is the word I'm using to describe that series today, there is a more compact review of key content. There's a wider range of problems stretching our interpretation of the proficiency strands. That's understanding, fluency, problem solving and reasoning. There are still very straightforward questions in this series, but if we stretch these proficiency strands further, then we can have a greater variety of difficulty through the different resources and exercises in the lessons. And of course, you would expect in the Essential series to have a much higher level of extension and enrichment available, leading to high level pathways, perhaps methods and or specialist maths. Okay, so just on the level of differentiation, we would like to say that there are three main levels of differentiation with the series. And this is really important, I think, in terms of how you use these books in your school setting. You might have a highly streamed setting, or you may not have any streaming at all and be wondering about how you can use this series, the core or essential, in a mixed ability classroom. So the first thing, of course, is which series to use. Is it going to be the higher level series, the essential, or the core series? Still cover all the Australian curriculum, but written at a slightly different level. So that, of course, is a significant choice. And at the end of this talk, I'll talk a little bit more about what conditions you might have at your school to help choose which series to use. Of course, many schools might want to use core and essential in the same school, or possibly even in the same class. The second level of differentiation would be which sections or which lessons are going to make up your topics that you're going to teach. You may be in a position where you just don't have time to teach every single section in a textbook. And so what the authors have done for this series, in conjunction with the publishers, is to try to define the sections which are clearly consolidating content from previous year's work. And we have called those consolidating sections in the core series and also in the essential series. We have all the standard sections, of course, which touch base with the content descriptors of that level. And we have a level of enrichment or extension in both series. There are enrichment questions within each exercise for both series, but at this level, we've also defined what whole lessons or what sections in a chapter might be regarded as being more challenging or extension. And the idea is to help teachers define the difficulty of these sections so that they can more easily construct a working program for the year. So I'll move on to that in a little bit more detail and show you what I mean by the classification of these sections. The third level of differentiation would be the working program. So what learning paths are we going to use once we've decided which sections to use? And there are 2 work programs available in the core series and 3 for the essential. And in the most recent editions and for the core coming up, these have been revamped and so that we have a clearer distinction between the different pathways. So that's something I'd like to talk about today as well. Okay, so a few minutes ago, I just mentioned the classification of the sections, and you can see from these examples that we have an essential maths example, that's Year 9, Chapter 6, indices and surds on the left, and a core example on the right. So you can see on the left, we have one section titled Consolidating, which is the first one, because the mathematics inside that introductory section on index notation would be generally covered in Year 8. Having said that, I think it's still a good idea to do this in a Year 9 class because it can review in a fairly compact way a number of things before they move on to Year 9 content. That's the key index laws, scientific notation, and so on. And then you can see at the end of that chapter, there are two sections which are titled Extending. And that's because an introduction into fractional indices and surds is really touching base with Year 10 Australian curriculum and opening up pathways for schools to perhaps insert a little bit more into Year 10, including in 10A, and that's why these sections are there. But they do go beyond the Australian curriculum for Year 9. In this core example, you can see we have a consolidating section, again, reviewing probability from Year 9 and before. But we don't have any sections called extending, and the reason for that is because in the core series, we have not jumped to the next level of the Australian curriculum. So in Year 7, we haven't included any Year 8 content. And in Year 10, for example, we haven't included any 10A curriculum. So that's one thing that defines core over essential. But one of the things we have done in core is tried to define those sections which the authors regarded as being more challenging. And perhaps many of you will agree that conditional probability and independence in this topic, while it is in the core Australian curriculum, it is more challenging. And students do find those sections challenging. We've tried to present it in such a way that makes it more accessible to a wide audience, but there are some sections which we regard as being more challenging, and that's how we have defined those sections. So if teachers are a little bit tight in terms of the time that they have to teach topics, they can hopefully use these classifications to help define what sections might be useful in completing their course across the year. Now, unpacking the differentiation down at a more micro level, I've mentioned these work programs, and anyone who's used Essential Maths or Gold series over the years would have noticed that we have these work programs which are both visible in the digital version, in the print version, and in collated Word documents to help teachers plan their courses. In the digital version, these are live, and I'll demonstrate that at the end of this webinar, where if you click on these tabs, then only those questions will appear for students. But you can see here in the Essential series, we have 3 work programs, so 3 levels of differentiation, if you like. So on the left is the easiest level, where they do all the fluency questions and the easiest selection or the easiest problem solving and reasoning questions that have been written to cover the proficiency strands. At the other extreme, we have the work programs such that students are still doing fluency, but they're doing much less and they're working through much quicker than other students. And you can see one of the newer features of core for this time round and for the Australian Curriculum Essential series is that we are now using fractions other than 1/2. So you can see we've got a third here, but we're using quarters as well. So 1/2, thirds and quarters are used to help define these 3 programs for Essential and also for core. So yes, the highest level includes the enrichment questions and all the more challenging problem solving and reasoning. it's a similar story for core as well, where we have two selections. The one on the right is perhaps slightly more challenging, a little bit less of the understanding, a slightly lighter dose of fluency and more challenging problem-solving reasoning, and also the enrichment question, appropriately written for core, but still a level of enrichment there as well. So that's how the work tabs correspond and create those 5 levels of differentiation, if you like. Now, these work programs are available as Word documents. As you can see, here's one example. And this is from the Essential series, but it's pretty well the same, the core as well. And you can see that all these tabs have been collated. And so if teachers wished to define their topic for the students and provide a handout of some sort, rather than just rely on what's in the book or in the digital form, this is available as one of the teacher resources. At our school, what we do is we take this Word document and alter things just to suit our program. For some classes, we might compact a couple of lessons, or we might expand one, or we might throw in a task at some point, and that helps to define the program for our school. Okay, this is just a quick summary of those 5 options. So the 2 work programs are the green columns on the left, and the 3 work programs are essentially the work programs for the essential math. So these are just 5 suggested columns or pathways leading to the courses, essential, general methods, or specialist at year 11 and 12. So, you know, at the highest level course on the right-hand side, just to explain the flexibility in the system and the fact that these overlap, allowing teachers to suggest different pathways to students over the year and from one year to the next. So on the right-hand side, for example, the highest level pathway might be a course that includes only a selected number of consolidating sections, all the standard sections and most of the extending or 10A sections, and using the right-hand tab, the advanced column. Or right at the other end, if you're using the core series, we might be doing all the consolidating section and the standard sections, but we might be excluding some of the gold star sections that I mentioned earlier, and we might be using the left work program as well, just making that workload a little bit shorter and a little bit easier for our perhaps weaker students. This poster is to be updated and will be available as well as part of the teacher resources.
Yeah, that's right, David. I'll just jump in to say that one of the things, of course, we'll be updating for in the Queensland version of this poster is obviously those senior subjects there at the bottom in blue. Those pertain to the old old Queensland courses. So we'll update those to the ones that are used now once we update this for the core series.
That's right. Thank you. All right, just on using core and essential, it may be possible in some schools, or it may be desired, if you like, to actually use both textbooks in the same class. At our school, we use the core series for a couple of classes as a whole, and the essential for the other classes. But in some, we actually do use the core series in amongst the essential series for some students. And this is indeed possible. And one of the things we've done to help in that process is created these grids. And I've just got a snip of part of one of the Word documents that's available as part of the teacher resources to show how the essential series, which is on the left, matches directly with the core series. And this, you know, as you can see, there are some sections that correspond and others not so well. So this document shows people how they match up, making it easier for teachers who wish to use use both series in the same class. So in this example for chapter 8, you can see that 8F is an extension section for the essential, obviously, and that section does not exist in the core series. So those students wouldn't be doing a section, and when students using essential would do 8G, that corresponds to 8F in the core series. So using this document can really help in the process of trying to teach a class where both books are being used. Now, this is true for years 7, 8 and 9 because there is quite a strong correlation between the series core and essential for 7, 8 and 9. And that was done on purpose. The authors have made sure that that correlation is very strong across both series from chapter to chapter. However, this cannot be done for year 10 because the year 10 core series is really built on a different foundation and leads more directly to a general maths or further maths, depending on where you come from. And the essential series really has too much 10A to allow us to make those series correspond chapter to chapter. So from 7 to 9, these documents are available. All right, so just moving on to a couple of features of the books now. That's new and new for the core series coming up as well. So we are retaining our warm-up quiz that we've had for quite some time. So printed into the book, into the core series, is what used to be called, I think, a diagnostic quiz or a pre-TAS is now renamed as a warm-up quiz, because really these questions are there to review previous content and to make connections with prior knowledge. So these are really warm-up questions leading into the topic rather than a diagnostic test of what they might already know about the topic. And so this has given rise to the creation of a new diagnostic test. And this is a test that is available to assess as to how much students know from the topic that's coming up. So there's now two types of diagnostic tests, the warm-up and the diagnostic. And as I've shown you there, they are available in a number of versions. One is a printable handout version if teachers wanted to use them that way, and they can also be distributed electronically and auto-marked through the Cambridge system. Okay, one of the new features which we inserted into the Essential series last year was the learning intentions. And I've got a couple of examples there. So there is quite a significant amount of evidence which suggests that it's important to be clear to students, I think, with regard to what's happening in the class and what the learning intentions are and what the objectives are for the lesson. And so the learning intentions or objectives, if you like, it tells students what they should know, what they should be able to understand, and what they should be able to do by the end of a lesson. And so these really can help provide focus for a lesson and also to help unpack the curriculum content descriptors and the elaborations, but down at the lesson level, rather than just looking at content descriptors, say, at a whole topic level. If you were to say write an Australian curriculum at a lesson level, then perhaps the learning intentions would help us understand what we're doing there. The language used with these learning intentions starts with to know, to understand, or to be able to. And that's consistent right across every single lesson for core as well as essential. And you can see with those examples that language is being used. You can see for the second one, that's the core example, there are less learning intentions, and that's because if you do compare core with essential, the trigonometry for core is spread out across more sections, and so there are less learning intentions in the core section that corresponds closely to that essential section. Also in core, we've gone one step further with our learning intentions, and that is to write out the key vocab for that section. So any word that's really important for that section is written here, is defined clearly in the glossary, and there are also strong connections here with what is in the key ideas. And those words, when they appear in the key ideas for that section, will be bolded. Now, these learning intentions are available as a collated teacher resource, as a Word document, so you can see all the learning intentions right across the chapter for the whole series, corresponding to which section and also corresponding to the Victorian curriculum content descriptors. All right, now one of the key features of Essential that we introduced last year that we think will be very effective for core is an idea called Now You Try. And so Now You Try is linked with each example. So every example not only has a video attached and with its solution and explanation, it also has now a Now You Try question, which is a very similar question to what's in the example. It became evident after teaching with the Essential for quite some time that teachers were using the examples and the videos to help teach, but wanted a little bit more so that students could do something on their own before they started off with the section exercises. So the Now You Try might be useful in that regard, or possibly even in a flipped learning model where students might watch the example video and then try the example straight away afterwards. The answers to these Now You Try are available in the printed version and can be looked up on the digital version as well. All right, now I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the exercises, but just note that with each of the different proficiency strands, there are the two or three differentiated learning pathways using the tabs, which are live in the digital version. The understanding sections, of course, are there. They have been revamped for the new series for core, whereby the questions are clearly linked to the key ideas. And so that we are checking to see if students comprehend all the key points in the key ideas, and they've been written in such a way so that teachers may wish to use these questions as part of their class discussion. There's a range of fluency, problem-solving, reasoning questions, of course, and as I mentioned earlier, the enrichment gold star question is available in gold as well. Remember that for core, we have the examples divided up in a greater way, if you like, so split up into more examples and spread out through the exercises to be really more immediately accessible to students for the questions that they're doing. And that's one of the bigger differences, I think, between core and essential. The formative assessment task, the progress quiz, is also still available in core and essential. This a reminder that the progress quiz is positioned about halfway to 2/3 of the way through a unit of work, allowing teachers to offer a little bit of assessment to see how their students are going before they get to the end of the topic. And this is available as a handout version with spaces provided, as well as an auto-marked version on the digital resource. Now in the core series, one of our features at the end of each topic is a Maths at Work investigation. And so these are retained and provide a context for students to apply the mathematics in a workplace, if you like. So there's a couple of those at the end of every chapter in the series. In the Essential series, we have about 2/3 of the way through the chapter an applications and problem solving set of questions, which are essentially extended response questions, which are reasonably or highly scaffolded with easy to more challenging parts. And that's just one example. And there's usually a double page or a triple page spread of those questions in Essential. For both series, Core and Essential, one of our new features is our modelling tasks. Because I think most of us believe that while we can highly scaffold tasks for tests and quizzes and so on, we need to be getting students to be a little more open-ended with their work and to be given the opportunity to explore an idea for themselves, to formulate ideas, to evaluate and communicate through some kind of project. And so our challenge for Core and Essential over the last couple of years is to come up with some clear modelling tasks based on this approach. But at the same time, be realistic, because it can be difficult, I think, at times just to give some kind of idea about what students should investigate without giving some guidance, which is why our modelling tasks are based on a certain structure. So what we have, and I've got an example here just running through it, is a task, a particular situation. In this example, we have a person who must walk from point C to point A, but there's a marshland in the middle. This relates to trigonometry, and they have to come up with a path to avoid the marshland, exploring bearings and side lengths of right angle triangles and so on. And they have some choice about how they might do this. So what we've done is created a preliminary task where students get to do a particular thing. So find the coordinates of the point P, corrected to decimal places, which is a point based on a particular bearing and a distance. So that's a bit of a setup first before they move on to their modelling task. So the modelling task is to find the shortest route around the marshland, and their job at the start is to write down all the relevant information and draw a diagram, and then possibly sketch one path. After they've done that, there are a number of questions that they need to solve to help them investigate what they need to do to try to find the shortest path around that marshland. So there's a number of scaffolded questions there, some explanation to do, some calculations to do, and some choices that can be made. So that's to solve, and then to evaluate and verify, they need to compare their results and explain what they've achieved. And to finish, to then finish writing up their work and write their report. And in each modelling task, we've offered an extension question as well, which in this case, explored the effect of your results if the point A was shifted to a different position, in which case the answer might be completely different.
David, I'll just jump in now. A few questions have come up about marking rubrics for these modelling activities, as well as in the Essential series, the applications and problem solving activities. So the question was just when will they be available, and the answer is let's say a couple of weeks, just because you and the other authors have been pretty swamped with school and trying to deal, as all of the teachers that are involved in this webinar have been just swamped due to things going on at school. So we are working on it, and we'll just say a couple of weeks from now, if that's okay. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, that sounds terrific.
Okay.
Yeah, some rubrics would be fantastic. I've got a few at school which I'm using, which would suit very nicely, but we'll come up with something that suits the structure of these tasks.
Yep, thanks.
Or at least something that people could modify if they have a different way of marking these things. All right, moving forward, we still retain a digital version of our investigations in both core and essential. And we also retain our puzzles and challenges pages. But for core, these challenges really are more about puzzles and games. And you can see by these two examples, they fit that category a little bit better. All right, now one of the new features that I'd like to talk about very briefly is the success criteria in both series. And these are available as a handout and collated versions for teachers as well. But they are printed into the textbook, and that's because we believe they're quite important. And that is the success criteria, which can really help teachers and students decide whether or not, in fact, they have achieved the learning intentions. But the goal here is on 2 or 3 pages, what are the main key things that students should be able to do by the end of the lesson? And so the authors have come up with these types of descriptors using that type of language. I can classify as an equation as true or false, for example. As well as that, there's a short example for each success criteria, so students have a clear idea about what those success criteria relate to. There's also the links on the left, so that if students are having trouble with that particular success criteria, or they don't think they can meet that requirement, then they could jump back to that section and try doing some more exercises from there. The mind map summaries are retained. Of course, the chapter reviews are there as well. One of the things we have done recently, though, is that we have decided to put the short answer questions first in the chapter summary, because they provide a better summary of all the different content of the chapter before they move into the multiple choice and the extended response questions. We have done a little bit of work on the glossary, especially for core in this new series coming up, because we now have the words in the learning intentions called key vocab. We have the glossary itself, and we also have the bolded words in the key ideas. So we wanted to make sure that all of those were covered comprehensively, so that all the bolded words and the key ideas are in the key vocab. And the key vocab might even have a few other important words, but all of those are clearly defined in the glossary. All right, so from a digital perspective, what I would like to do is just switch over now to the digital series for one of the textbooks. And I'm hoping you can all see that now. As you can see in the digital version, all the things I've talked about for today are there and visible, just like they would be in the print textbook. So there you go, there's the learning intentions for one of the sections. And this would be very similar for essential as it is for core. The shortcut links to the examples, I might just scroll down quickly for you. With the examples, you can see there are links to a video for every example, and they're also the Now You Tries are in here, and links to the answers for those as well. In the actual exercise though, as well, you'll notice that there are now workspaces available for every part of every question. So if I now open a workspace, you can see there are a number of options with regard to how students can fill in their work. So if they're in a completely digital format and doing all their results, not just showing answers for an algorithm to judge, but showing their work solutions as well. The strong belief at Cambridge, I think, is that we want students to be showing their working steps all the way through and not just aiming for an answer at every question. And so having the ability here to write in their work and check their answer is very important, and having all this information available for their teacher on the teacher database as well, including their working, is an important feature of this space. So they could type a response, but perhaps most students would select the draw function and start drawing. I might even try to attempt to do that now. So what am I? X divided by 12 equals cosine of 65 degrees. And you could see they could work from there. They can submit those results to the teacher, and they can do that for every question. I would encourage people to also look at the interactive walkthrough examples and the quizzes. There are 3 quizzes for every section, and these are digital auto-marked quizzes where the results again are fed back to the teacher. These have been revamped to suit the content of the new series. Three quizzes, easy, medium, hard if you like, but they're all written to suit the content of the course. While I'm here, I noticed that we've got these little Desmos calculator links as well. I'd encourage you to play with those. I won't give a full demonstration now, but in Desmos geometry, for example, you may wish to highlight a chord theorem or a circle theorem of some sort, and you can very easily build shapes and measure angles and so on without really having to learn the ins and outs of too much of software like Geometry Sketchpad or something like that. So there you go. I've almost constructed circle theorem number 1 there. So there is a Desmos geometry tool, graphing calculator, which many people are familiar with, and scientific calculator as well. In terms of teacher resources, Scott, did you want to talk a little bit about some of the teacher resources? And I'll click away here demonstrating a couple of those things.
Sure, yeah. So in terms of I'll just start by talking about the Word document package that you would get by going to the teacher resources in there. So for this is the standard, the essential series here. You can see there that there are some curriculum and supporting documents up the top. David showed some of the working programs earlier. So those are Word document collations of all the working programs that are in the textbook. If you wanted to cut and paste the question numbers into your own documents for students or for your own purposes. Then we've got the work solutions there as well. And then going down in terms of the chapter tests and worksheets. So for the essential, we've got the worksheets. There's usually 2 or 3 worksheets per chapter, and then the chapter tests. You may already know there are 4 chapter tests, and they're differentiated at 3 levels. So there's an easier one that sort of links with the first working program, the learning pathway, the foundation. Then there are 2 in the middle at a standard level, and then the D test, the 4th test, is aligned with the 3rd working program, the advanced learning pathway. We don't have it up here at the moment, but for the core series, there is a greater number of types of these documents available. So as well as worksheets and chapter tests, there are also skill sheets. So these are a set of questions that are like the first couple of fluency questions that are in the exercises, and there's usually about 2 or 3 or 4 skill sheets per chapter. They focus on the most pertinent skills for that particular topic. There are investigations as well. There are maths literacy activities which are unique to the core series as well. So we don't have these for the central series. They're not as needed for those students, but for the core series, these are activities that ask students to to get really comfortable with the language of the mathematics that is used in that topic. So there are things like cloze activities, where their students are given a paragraph or a short series of sentences and statements about the mathematics in the topic, with gaps where they have to fill in the blanks, either with a list of options available or not. There's also some crosswords and other type of maths literacy-based activities. For example, you may have a scenario given in a diagram or a graph, and then the student has to give a worded description of what's going on mathematically, so that they get used to using the language of maths, and they get comfortable and are not afraid to use those words and definitions and so on. David, did you want to move on to the more digital aspects of the teacher resource? One of the things is the test maker that is available for both of the series. It functions the same in core as it does in the main series. The task manager is something that is a big topic in itself. It probably will take too much time to go through that today, but that is a way of creating differentiated paths involving all of the different activities in the exercise questions and the walkthroughs and widgets and so on, videos and all the kinds of things that are contained within this interactive textbooks. You can set that up for your students so they'll see their own path through a topic. We've just released templates for those as well, so that's something that you can look at. If you want more information on that, I would suggest getting in touch with your rep. It is a big feature, and there's quite a lot involved, so there's not really time to go into it in detail here. But David, is there some screenshots you have?
Yes, I might just quickly mention the self-assessment. So when students get to the end of a question, there is the option for them to do some self-assessment, so they can let their teacher know how they think they're going with that particular question by filling in the left-hand side here. And that feedback is passed on to teachers, and you can also let your teachers know about the trouble you've had with a particular question by checking the box to raise a red flag for that particular question. And just to give you an idea of what the teachers might see through the database is something like this, where they can see here's their class, and you can see how much of the pathway students have been completing. Sorry, and it's you can see this. Linda's done 99%. There's a lot of red feedback from Linda, which is not surprising, and not much green. So you can see this, the self-assessment there is a concern, and she's raised the flag 16 times through that particular lesson. And so that provides important feedback for teachers. And also, if you want a summary of the red flags for the different questions, teachers have this spreadsheet, if you like, available for the class, so they can see the common red flags across the different students in the class to decide as to whether or not a teacher would perhaps concentrate on one or two questions where there's lots of red flags, or perhaps just do some one-on-one with a particular student. All right, so that's just some feedback for staff with the reporting system. Just to finish, Scott, if I may, before I hand back over to Kim, I might just sort of try to answer this question first. Where might the core series fit into your school? And as I said before, the core series does cover all of the Australian curriculum, just not extending all the 10A sections. So perhaps at a fairly crude level, I might say that if you felt that your school was a high-performing school, then you may wish to use core for specific classes, or classes that are definitely leading on a pathway to general or essential maths. If you felt your school was a medium level school, then perhaps you might use core for a number of classes. So a number of classes, 2 or 3 classes might use core and 2 or 3 classes might use essential. Or at the other end, you could possibly use core for the majority of classes in the school. So I guess that all depends on where teachers feel the core fits in, but by having a look at core against essential, they should be able to make that decision. All right, so Kim, that's it for me at the moment. Am I able to stop sharing and pass back to you, and then
Yes.
perhaps we can answer any other questions?
Excellent. Thank you so much, David. That was really informative. Great way to look at the text in a much more or a closer way than we would otherwise have the opportunity to. So it's always great to see. So I'm just going to share my screen, and it'll be very quick. I've just got a few little slides that I wanted to share with you. Why is that happening? Everything's stuck at this. There we go. All right. So just to share pricing, which is $69.95 for the print and digital, which includes the interactive textbook. And then if you're wanting to be digital only, of course, that's an option at $57.95. But I would like to say, if you wanted to reach out to your reps or consultants in your area, please do that, and they can give you some more detail about pricing options in each state. Yeah. The stock availability. So I've been a little bit vague about this, but I can say that we expect each of the year levels to be out within these months. I would like to say that I have a date, but really it's easier just to say look for late in the month, late October, late December, hopefully not late December. We all have our fingers crossed, but these are the dates. Yes. Final slide is our feedback form. Please take the time to fill out the feedback form. Most importantly, this is where you are going to receive your free textbook. Yes, so make sure that you fill out the form, choose the book that you're wanting to get that's free. And this is also an opportunity for you to say if you wanted to be communicated with by your rep. Yeah, so that your information will then go out to them and they can make contact with you, perhaps doing a one-on-one Zoom meeting so that we can go into even more in-depth communication about the digital side of the platform, which is always a great idea if that's something that you're looking at. So if you've got some questions that you would like to ask, please use the Q&A text box that's in the bottom ribbon, the black ribbon down the bottom on the far right. And both David and Scott, and of course the sales team too. So if you've got some sales questions that you wanted to put out there as well, please feel free to do that inside the text box as well. So I think we've already got some questions for you, David, that you might be able to respond to that we received prior to the webinar. Is that right, Scott? I think we did.
Happy to answer any questions. Scott, if you wanted to just summarise them for me.
I think that a few have come through and we've got through them all. There's just one, Kim, unanswered, and that is just about the price of the digital per year.
Okay, well, we'll communicate with you directly actually about that one. So the digital cost depends on how we will create a package for you. So we'll speak specifically to you about that once we get your feedback form. If we can do it that way, that would be great. Are there any other questions? I think there's another one coming up.
And just on the same kind of topic, Kim, if from Helen, if the hard copy is only $10 more, then does the digital part of the book expire after a year, or is it still available for subsequent students?
we reactivate the interactive portion of the digital textbook. So the first year it does come as part of that initial price point, and in following years we charge a reactivation fee, and that's really something that's specific to the state and how we create the package for you. So that's something we can directly communicate with you about to give you a better pricing guide on what that might look like for you.
I'll just, while we're waiting for more questions, perhaps I just wanted to say quickly with the expected dates that these books will be published. The reason we can't give a precise date right now is that the publishing industry is just one of every single industry around the world that has been affected by the pandemic this year. It has been it's been a nightmare here at Cambridge, as it will have been at every publisher all around the world. The pandemic, the lockdowns around the world have affected our printers and typesetters and other aspects of the supply chain. So if you can imagine how it would be working from home as a typesetter or a printer, you may get a sense of what it's been like and why there might be some slight delays. So we're not expecting things to be too late, but the dates have been affected compared to what we thought before this whole thing hit at the start of the year. So yeah, we appreciate your patience, and we'll keep everyone updated as we go through the next month or so.
Is it fair, if I could just add, Scott, is it fair to say that since the proofs are pretty well in a final position, if teachers did wish to view any pages at any time from now, they could certainly request pages to have a look at?
Absolutely, yeah. They just need to get in touch with their rep, and they'll help out.
That's great.
So Jackie, in response to that question, yes, we do have tutorial videos detailing the workings of the textbook itself. I would recommend again to communicate directly with your consultant in your area, and we can send out links to videos or take you through a one-on-one consultation and direct you through the digital platform itself so that you can see it in its working form. Yeah. Okay, well, if there's no more questions, know that you can always send any further questions out to any of the consultants. Anything that you wanted to ask David, you are absolutely welcome to send any questions through to me or any of the other consultants, and I will absolutely forward those on to David himself. So on behalf of Cambridge, thank you all for coming along, and thank you so much, David, for putting the time and effort into creating the webinar for us. It's excellent.
Been a pleasure. Thanks very much, Kim, for everything you've done too.
Thank you, and thank you, everyone. Thank you very much.